Good evening. In honor of this weekend's premiere of the grand piece, George Washington, we bring to you music of his time period itself, on the sorts of instruments that he heard and the types of music that he enjoyed, the dances, the marches, the theater tunes, and so forth. We begin with a toast written in his honor in 1778 by New Jersey signer Francis Hopkinson. A toast. 'Tis Washington's health, fill a bumper all round, for he is our glory and pride. Our arms shall in battle with conquest be crowned, whilst virtue and he's on our side. Our arms shall in battle with conquest be crowned, whilst virtue and he's on our side. 'Tis Washington's health, loud cannon should roar, and trumpets the truth should proclaim. There cannot be found, search all the world o'er, his equal in virtue and fame. Cannot be found, search all the world o'er, his equal in virtue and fame. 'Tis Washington's health, our hero to bless. May heaven look graciously down. Oh, long may he live, our hearts to possess, and freedom still call him her own. Oh, long may he live, our hearts to possess, and freedom still call him her own. Thank you.
We're playing instruments for you tonight that are of George Washington's time, very much so. He owned a spinet harpsichord. He owned an English guitar. He did not own a Baroque guitar, but that was how guitars looked in Washington's time.
He heard them on many occasions, though, in public.
The guitar was a terrifically fancy instrument, and mostly because the idea of the guitar was elitist, I'm afraid. And they needed to keep them very fancy and very expensive in order to keep them out of the hands of people who couldn't afford them. I'm about to play a hammered dulcimer here. That's an instrument that came to these shores in 1719 and was played mostly by itinerant professional musicians. There were not a lot of them that were played, but there were a lot of them that were heard because these itinerant professional musicians made their entire living by gaining an audience, as yourself. Thank you very much for coming. The tune we're about to play on the hammered dulcimer is the President's March. If you recognize this tune, it's because it was a terrifically popular patriotic song in the 19th century. Throughout the 19th century, actually, it was called Hail Columbia, but it was written originally as an instrumental piece and as the President's March, specifically for George Washington, by a man named Philip Fyle, who was a Hessian musician hired to do us in during the Revolution. He was doing a really good job playing music for the British officers on the banks of the Delaware on Christmas Eve of 1776, and was captured along with all of his buddies. He became a prisoner of war, and the next night he was playing music for his American officers. And
you recognize this tune as the melody to which the words Hail Columbia would later be set. And that song, of course, was a fine contender with the Star-Spangled Banner as our nation was deciding upon its national anthem. More on that a little bit later. President's March is followed by Sweet Richard, one of our favorite country dance tunes. Washington himself, a renowned dancer. Thank you very much. Our next piece, as with several others in tonight's program, is a parody. Parody meaning, in musical terms, a resetting of a familiar melody with new words. This was very common through the colonial period and well into the 19th century here in America, not just with songs and ballads, but in church as well. Many people tried fashioning new settings of the psalms and hymns and so forth to old familiar tunes. Well, the tune that is borrowed into this case is an Old English one, and done by an Old English man. Thomas Paine decided to write some new words during our American Revolution. So in 1776, he came up with a new setting called Liberty Tree. And Liberty Tree is 4 verses, all of parable, about how America became the place of freedom, the attractive freedom that encouraged people not to come for peace and for prosperity and so forth. He was a very forward-looking visionary, even though he was British. Liberty Tree.
In a chariot of light from the In a chariot of light from the regions of day, the goddess of liberty came. 10,000 celestials directed the way, and thither conducted the dame. This fair budding branch from the garden above, where millions with millions agree, she brought in her hand as a pledge of her love the plant she called Liberty Tree. This celestial exotic struck deep in the ground, like a native it flourished and bore. The fame of its fruit drew the nations around to seek out its peaceable shore. Unmindful of names or distinction they came, for freemen like brothers agree. With one spirit endowed they one friendship pursued, and their temple was Liberty Tree. Beneath this fair branch, like the patriarchs of old, their bread in contentment they eat, unwearied with trouble of silver or gold, or the cares of the grand and the great. With timber and tar they old England supplied, supported her power on the seas. Her battles they fought without having a groat, for the honor of Liberty Tree. But hear, O ye swains, 'tis a tale most profane, how all the tyrannical powers, King Commons and Lords, are uniting amain to cut down this guardian of ours. From the east to the west, blow the trumpet to arms, through the land let the sound of it flee. Let the far and the near all unite with a cheer, in defense of our Liberty Tree. Thank you.
We move now to the events in Massachusetts that required George Washington to go north as the leader of the Continental Army. This, of course, would be the events of April of 1775. And reportedly, and I say it that way because we try to document very carefully all of the other statements we make from the stage, but reportedly, the very first tune played by the fifer from Acton, Massachusetts, as he was leading his militiamen to meet the British at Concord Bridge. The very first tune was called The White Cockade.
So it's known as the First March of the American Revolution.
you very much.
And a song that was written when the news spread about the events at Lexington and Concord, the shot heard round the world. Boston had been an occupied city for quite some time, and the people of Boston were pretty sick of the British. And so when the news spread that the British were sorely embarrassed at Lexington and Concord, it was met with great glee. And there was a particular poet on the streets of Boston who, when he heard the story, also heard that the British ended up running away from the gunfire, and that the farmers, they didn't know, or maybe they didn't care, of that very specific rule of war that says when your enemy begins to retreat, you stop shooting. Therefore, they were getting quite some bullets from behind as they were retreating, and many of them were shot not in the honorable side of their body. And he took great glee in this and wrote a song. You know, George Washington was of the highest class, and this song is not. So our apologies. This is as low as we'll go tonight. You've heard worse. By my faith, but I think you're all makers of bulls, with your brains in your breeches, your guts in your skulls. Get home with your muskets and put up your swords, and look in your books for the meaning of words.
You see now, my honeys, how much you're mistaken, for concord by discord could never be beaten. You see now, my honeys, how much you're mistaken, for concord by discord could never be beaten.
How brave you went out with your muskets all bright, and thought to be frightened the folks with the fight. But when you got there, how they powdered your palms, and all the way home, how they peppered your bums.
And is it not, honeys, a comical farce, to be proud in your face and be shot in the arse? Is it not, honeys, a comical farce, to be proud in your face and be shot in the arse?
Now they did not know how to be after their firelocks as smartly as you. Why, you see now, my honeys, 'tis nothing at all but to pull at the trigger and pop goes the ball. And what have you got now with all your designing but a town without victuals to sit down and dine in, and to look on the ground like a parcel of noodles, and sing how the Yankees have beaten the Doodles?
I'm sure if you're wife, you'll make peace for a dinner, for fighting and fasting will soon make you thinner. To look on the ground like a parcel of noodles, and sing how the Yankees have beaten the Doodles.
Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Going now to the opera. The Beggar's Opera of 1728 came to America in 1750. Took every stage by storm. It was popular for a century. It was huge. 70 pieces of music in this opera. We will sing for you exactly 3 of them, all from the voice of Captain Macheath. This is the original Mac the Knife. You may not know that story, but it's a good one. The Beggar's Opera and the Threepenny Opera are the same story. The 3 songs. First, his boasting and womanizing song, very much in his awful character. The second, he's about to be hanged, and he's singing his angry song to the tune of Greensleeves. Yeah? Okay. And the third of the 3, the main love song of the piece, it's called Over the Hills and Far Away.
If the heart of a man is depressed with cares,
The mist is dispelled when a woman appears. Like the notes on a fiddle, she sweetly, sweetly raises our spirits and charms our ears. Roses and lilies her cheeks disclose, but her ripe lips are more sweet than those. Caress her with blisses and kisses, dissolve us in pleasure and soft repose. Roses and lilies her cheeks disclose, but her ripe lips are more sweet than those. Caress her with blisses and kisses, dissolve us in pleasure and soft repose. Since laws were made for every degree to cure vice and others as well as me, I wonder ye had better company upon Tyburn tree. But gold from law can take out the sting, and if rich men like you were to swing, 'twould thin the land to such numbers to string upon Tyburn tree. On Greenland's coast, and in my arms embraced my lass, warm amidst eternal frost, too soon the half-year's night would pass, and I would love thee every day, every night we'd kiss and play, if with me you would fondly stray over the hills and far away. And were I sold on Indian soil, soon as the burning day was closed, I would mock the sultry toil, if on my lover's breast reposed. And I would love thee every day, every night we'd kiss and play, if with me you'd fondly stray over the hills and far away. Thank you so much. So Washington was a true appreciator of the arts. As mentioned before, he loved to dance after these theatrical presentations. And this next tune has several levels of meaning because it's entitled The Dance. It's a song celebrating the American victory at Yorktown in October of 1781. With the French, we succeeded in blockading the Brits. And some brilliant person, we have no idea who, decided to take the old tune Yankee Doodle and rub it in their faces a little bit. Not the first time and not the last time to use such a tune in such a situation. But this is extremely brilliant because what the author does is he likens the troop movements of the American and British armies down in Virginia and the Carolinas as they were sort of attacking or approaching, retreating, circling. Washington was trying to buy time for the French to arrive. And during that, if you sketched it all out, it looks a little bit like the instructions for a country dance. And thus the title of this tune, The Dance, a ballad to the tune of Yankee Doodle. I know we're in the Kennedy Center, but join us in the chorus if you'd like. It's kind of fun. It's just about the best American song that ever was.
I sang Yankee Doodle at the Kennedy Center.
There you go. One sec. We'll do a pair of verses, then chorus, pair of verses, chorus. Cornwallis led a country dance, the like was never seen, sir. Much retrograde and much advance, and all with General Greene, sir. They rambled up, they rambled down, joined hands, then off they run, sir. Our General Greene to Charleston, the Earl to Wilmington, sir. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. Greene in the South and danced a set and got a mighty name, sir. Cornwallis danced with Lafayette, but suffered in his fame, sir. Then down he figured to the shore, most like a lordly dancer, and on his courtly honor swore he would no more advance, sir. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. And Washington, Columbia's son, whom easy nature taught, sir, that grace which can't by pains be won, or Pluto's gold be bought, sir. So hand in hand they circle round this ever-dancing pier, sir. Their gentle movements soon confound the Earl as they draw near, sir. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy. Well, his music soon forgets to play, his feet can move no more, sir. And all his bands now curse the day they jigged it to our shore, sir. Now, Tories, all what can you say? Come, is this not a griper? That while your hopes are danced away, 'tis you must pay the piper. Yankee Doodle, keep it up, Yankee Doodle dandy. Mind the music and the step, and with the girls be handy.
Thank you very much. Our next parody is not a parody. Sorry.
This is one of the few original American tunes that we are singing this evening. It's a ballad
describing, during the French and Indian Wars, the death of General James Wolfe up at Quebec. Now, George Washington was fortunate to have 2 horses shot out from under him in the French and Indian Wars. But James Wolfe, when he came to America, unfortunately, it was the other way around, was shot off of his horse. And this is a ballad apparently still sung by traditional ballad singers today, over 250 years later. It's a haunting tune, one that doesn't show up in Europe at all, so it's uniquely American. The Death of Wolfe. Cheer up your hearts, young men, let nothing fright you. Be of a gallant mind, let that delight you. Let not your courage fail till after trial, nor let your fancy move at the first denial. One day a gallant youth did cross the ocean to free America from her invasion. He landed at Quebec with all his party, the city to attack, both brave and hearty. Brave Wolfe drew up his men in a foremost pretty on the plains of Abraham before the city. There just before the town the French did meet them, and with double numbers they resolved to beat them. Well, the drums did loudly beat and the colors were flying, the purple gore did stream as the men lay a-dying. Then shot from off his horse fell this brave hero, and we lament his loss in weeds of sorrow. The French began to break, their ranks went a-flying. Brave Wolfe then seemed to wake as he lay a-dying. He lifted up his head as the gun still rattled, and to his army said, "How goes the battle?" Well, his aide-de-camp replied, "'Tis in our favor. Quebec with all her pride, we soon shall have her. She will fall into our hands with all her treasure." "Oh, then," replied brave Wolfe, "I die with pleasure." Thank you very much. Americans had a wonderful way of taking British tunes and turning them back against the Brits.
So when we took the British Grenadiers, that sacred song, and wrote a piece about George Washington, the choosing of that melody, of course, was Salt in the Wound. And we love to sing it still.
It wasn't the first parody. This Washington text dates from 1776, but 2 years before, Americans sang against taxation using the tune British Grenadiers. And by the War of 1812, we find in songbooks an old war song of 76, new and vamped. So we keep using this song, as long as we kept having Brits, luckily, until only the end of 1814. Vain Britons boast no longer with proud indignity. By land your conquering legions, your matchless strength at sea. Since we your sons incensed, our swords have girded on. Huzzah, 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 huzzah for war and Washington. Still deaf to mild entreaties, still blind to England's good, you have for 30 pieces betrayed your country's blood. Like Aesop's cur you'll gain but a shadow for your bone, yet find us fearful shades indeed inspired by Washington. Mysterious, unexampled, incomprehensible, the blundering schemes of Britain their downfall well foretell. Like lions roar and grumble, mere asses have ye shown, and ye shall share an ass's fate and drudge for Washington. Great heavens, is this the nation whose thundering arms were hurled through Europe, Africa, India, waters of the world? The luster of your former deeds, whole ages of renown, can be lost in a moment or transferred to us in Washington. So think not thirst of glory unsheathes our vengeful sword, to rend your bands asunder and cast away your cords. 'Tis heaven-born freedom fires us all and strengthens each brave son, from him who humbly guides the plow to a god like Washington. Fired with that great idea, our fathers' shades would rise, to view the stern contention, the gods desert their skies. And Wolfe, mid hosts of heroes, superior bending down, cry out with eager transport, well done, brave Washington. Notice the reference to Wolfe, who had passed a good 7 years before, was considered an American hero, and invoked in the spirit of American heroism to look down on Washington and give him his blessings.
Next, a minuet that was written specifically for George Washington. He was, of course, a very fine dancer. We do not have any historic record of him dancing with Martha Washington. She may not have been a dancer at all. She may have had some physical problem that prevented her from dancing, but George Washington always danced with the highest-ranking woman at the ball. And they were the first dancers because George Washington was always the highest-ranking man in the room. And if you danced the minuet, you knew exactly where you stood in society. And everybody watched you, too. It was just one couple at a time. A lot of stress there. Dress better be good. The fancy minuet danced before General Washington, 1792, by Pierre Landrin Duport.
So of all the music written for Washington and about Washington, presented to Washington as this last piece, probably the most important music he was exposed to, he mayhaps did not understand how important it would become. And I'm speaking of the music that was done by the slaves on the plantations in the South. Unbelievably early are the references to slave music making and the adoption of instruments like the banjo and the drum and so forth, and the learning to play upon the fiddle, and even the French horn in plantation homes. And the reports from the 1740s and 50s and 60s foresee how this music was attracting the interest of many others. Our next piece, we can't date quite as far back. This is probably around 1820. This very early spiritual was collected. But it's very much in the style of the African syncopated rhythms and the call and response singing, and the use of a different kind of a scale from that familiar to Europeans and Americans. Don't Be Weary Traveler was collected in the 20s and then published right after the Civil War in a very important collection called Slave Songs of the United States.
Sorry, my bad.
Of course.
Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus.
My head got wet with the midnight dew. Come along home to Jesus. Angels bear me witness to. Come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler. Come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler. Come along home to Jesus. Where to go I did not know. Come along home to Jesus. Jesus. Ever since he freed my soul, come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler, come along home to Jesus. I looked at the world and the world looked new. Come along home to Jesus. I looked at the world and the world looked new. Come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler. Come along home to Jesus. Don't be weary, traveler. Come along home to Jesus.
A little extra into the program because we realized when we put this together that we forgot to include a piece especially for the ladies.
If I were to play this piece for you on this guitar, which I am, it will be the only gender-correct piece of music I've played for you today. First of all, a woman of any social class would not be seen performing in front of strangers outside of her home. She would definitely never be seen playing the violin. Never.
And she should be actually at the keys of the spinet rather than the guy. Well, guys actually played spinets as well, but it was a very appropriate feminine instrument. Really, these were the two before the Revolution. We add the French harp after the Revolution.
So this instrument is called an English guitar. George Washington bought one of these for his step-granddaughter, Nellie Custis, and it was a big part of the Mount Vernon home. Actually, David is gender correct. I am gender correct for the only time tonight. Yay!
So this English guitar really is not a guitar at all. It's an adapted cittern from the Renaissance era, where for somebody decided in England around 1750 to take the old instrument, to restring it into an open tuning, and to try to put it into the laps of ladies. And they were very successful, because not just Washington, but in the Jefferson family, the daughters played this. Many Moravian women played it. Charles Wilson Peale painted quite a few upper-class women with their English guitars in their laps.
It's pretty clear to us from our research that this was the more popular of the guitars than the fancy one.
So one little Irish jig tune for you, instrumentally, which was the way most of the music was made at Mount Vernon on their keyboard instruments and the flute that Jackie played as well.
Thank you very much. Our last tune is another parody, one that is dear to our hearts.
One of many.
Our national anthem, you've heard, it was an old English drinking song. The whole thing about music of this period is that every good melody was a parody many, many times. Parody was very important to the printing, distribution, and the people who ran the printing presses, because most of them did not have musical type. And so if they could print a song and everybody just knew the tune anyway, then they didn't have to worry about that. It was cheaper, it was easier, and parody was just the way of music in this time period. Our national anthem is unique in that we know exactly the origin of this melody. It does not come from the folk traditions. And that origin is thus. In the 1760s in London, there was a group of gentlemen that formed what was called a gentleman's club. These were upper-class gentlemen, not the kinds on the Florida billboards. These were real gentlemen, and they got together and they did a lot of literary stuff. They sang a lot of music together. They played quite a bit of music as well, and they drank a lot of punch. But this particular group in London in the 1760s thought themselves better than the previous names of these gentlemen's clubs that were the Tuesday Club and the Saturday Club, and that was just way too plebeian for them. And so they decided to name their club after Anacreon and call themselves the Anacreontic Society. Now, Anacreon was a poet around 500 BC in Greece. And Anacreon's name was known by most in London because Anacreon had written all of his poems about women and wine. So the name Anacreon elicited those same kinds of eye winks that today the name Hugh Hefner would elicit. And so it was a little weighty to call yourselves the Anacreontic Society, but they were really proud of it. So they had this song that they composed, and it started out as a poem with a really odd meter, so they couldn't find a normal, regular, everyday tune to go with it. So they had to hire somebody to write a melody to their great poem. In their poem, they ask Anacreon, "Will you be our sponsor?" And Anacreon answers from heaven, "Yes, of course, if you will espouse my ideals of women and of wine."
So they published this music. Curiously, and very possibly, we're not positive, it was either 1779 or 1780. We'd like to think it was published in 1779 because that's the year that Francis Scott Key was born. And the idea of this melody hitting the streets in London in the same year that Francis Scott Key is born out in Frederick, Maryland, is really kind of interesting to trace. So as Ginger suggested, this melody caught on and became parodized widely. In fact, we scholars have collected over 85 different versions of the Anacreontic song, just up to 1820. And most important this evening, I think, might be the one for George Washington. I'd like to just quote, we're going to actually sing the first verse of the true Anacreontic song as it was published, the real drinking song. And we'll also sing the first verse of the song Adams and Liberty, which was the hit of America in 1798. And we'll close actually with the third verse of another parody that Francis Scott Key wrote, not the Star-Spangled Banner, but a song welcoming Stephen Decatur at a dinner over in Georgetown. I think Georgetown's that way from here, right? So 200 years ago, or 195 years ago, is how we'll end up the melody. But let me just quote from the Washington version. It's Jove, pleased with the prospect, majestic arose, and said by ourself they shall not be neglected, but ever secure, though surrounded by foes, by Washington, bravely upheld and protected. And while peace and plenty preside o'er their plains, while memory exists, and while gratitude reigns, his name ever loved and remembered shall be, while Columbians remain independent and free. Here's the tune. To Anacreon in heaven, where he sat in full glee, a few sons of harmony sent a petition that he their inspirer and patron would be. When this answer arrived from that jolly old Grecian, voice, fiddle, and flute no longer be mute. I'll lend you my name and inspire you to boot. And besides, I'll instruct you like me to entwine the myrtle of Venus with Bacchus's vine. And besides, I'll instruct you like me to entwine the myrtle of Venus with Bacchus's vine. Ye sons of Columbia, who bravely have fought for those rights which unstained from your sires had descended, may you long taste the blessings your valor has bought, and your sons reap the soil which your fathers defended. Mid the reign of mild peace, may your nation increase with the glory of Rome and the wisdom of Greece.
And ne'er may the sons of Columbia be slaves, while the earth bears a plant or the sea rolls its waves. And ne'er may the sons of Columbia be slaves, while the earth bears a plant or the sea rolls its waves. In the conflict resistless each toil they endured, till their foes fled dismayed from the war's desolation. And pale beamed the crescent, its splendor obscured by the light of the star-spangled flag of our nation. Where each radiant star gleamed a meteor of war, and the turbaned heads bowed to its terrible glare. Now mixed with the olive the laurel shall wave, and form a bright wreath for the brows of the brave. Now mixed with the olive the laurel shall wave, and form a bright wreath for the brows of the brave.
Play ball.
Thank you so very much.